Good day. Welcome to the monthly webinar series for Conexxus. Today's series is on ransomware protection and how a managed security service provider can protect oil and gas retailers from being the next target. And backed by popular demand, we're excited to have Ajit Adekandi back with us from Hughes. He is the Director of Product Management and Marketing. So Ajit, thank you and welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Next slide. Next slide, please. We'll go through a couple of housekeeping items today, and we'll talk a little bit more about Ajit and about Conexxus. We'll have Ajit go through his presentation and then questions and answers. Next slide. Just a reminder that the webinar is being recorded and it will be made available in approximately 7 days. You can find it on YouTube if you subscribe to Conexxus Online, or you can go to conexxus.org under resources. There's a website link for you to see all of the webinars that have been produced by Conexxus. After the webinar has concluded, you will receive a survey, and it's just a 3-4 question survey. And it's in email form. And once you complete the survey, then you will receive a link to the webinar here. And we do ask that you do ask the questions using the GoToWebinar question panel, as all attendees are in listen-only mode. Today, our host is Allie Russell. So Allie, thanks for hosting us today. I'm your moderator, Cara Gunderson. And as I mentioned, Ajit is our speaker for today. Next slide. Conexxus is an independent, nonprofit, member-driven technology organization. And I can tell you that they are really derived of volunteers such as myself. Ajit is another volunteer for Conexxus. And so we're really the group that helps set the standards, do the data exchange, so on and so forth for Conexxus. And they also provide vision, and you can see them often participating in other industries. Next slide. We've had some great webinars in 2020, and again, all of these are available under conexxus.org or under YouTube in the Conexxus Online. Next slide. We've got some more webinars coming in November, more on cybersecurity, and we have EMV coming in December, and then in January, securely connecting third-party vendors. Next slide. We'd like to thank our 2020 Diamond sponsors for Conexxus, because without you, we're not able to provide all these great programs, and so thank you for all that you do and for your contributions. Next slide. And here's Ajit to talk about the ransomware protection and how an MNSP can protect oil and gas retailers from being the next target. Ajit.
Thank you, Cara. Good afternoon, everyone. My name, as I mentioned, is Ajit Adekandi. First and foremost, I wanted to thank the Conexxus team of Cara and Ali for giving me the opportunity to present to this esteemed group. This session is intended to provide an overview of endpoint protection and how it not only helps in protecting against traditional threats like malware and zero-day threats, but also targeted attacks like ransomware. Now, the global pandemic has seen a huge rise in people working from home, shopping online, generally being more digitally connected than ever. And based on that, the retail stores have modified their operations to cater to the consumer, making drastic changes in the way they operate. There are plenty of good things that have come from this, but there are a lot of bad as well. One of the biggest issues is that cyber attacks have skyrocketed during this period. Cyber criminals have taken this opportunity to up their attacks, both in frequency and scope. So this session will provide an overview of how you can protect yourselves from sophisticated attacks instead of falling victims to the cyber criminals. Like I mentioned before, the numbers are staggering and scary. The FBI recently reported that the number of complaints about cyber attacks to their cyber division is up to as many as 4,000 a day. That represents a 600% increase from what they were seeing pre-coronavirus. Now, certain types of attacks are even more, like the COVID-19 themed attacks, where cyber criminals get access to a system through the use of phishing or social engineering attacks, have jumped up to 20 to 30,000 a day in the US alone. And this is going to get even worse in the next few weeks. Now, malware or malicious software is any piece of software that was written with intent of doing harm to data, devices, or people. So the types of malware include like the Trojans or the spywares, ransomware, fileless malwares, or hybrid attacks. Social engineering is by far the most prominent method the cyber criminals employ for attacks. An unsuspecting human would then download the malware from an attachment or from a website. Another method that is something called a drive-by download, wherein you visit an unsuspecting website which has automatic downloads of malware in the background. How do you protect against that? Cyber criminals can also place advertisements on the most trusted websites you visit. And once you click on them, a malicious software is downloaded. And then there are exploit kits, which are pre-written software which takes advantages of already existing vulnerabilities in the code. Ransomware attacks where cyber criminals hold your computer data or network hostage until a ransom is paid has been successful during the pandemic on a level we have not seen before. The hackers have gained control of major companies and systems and demand large ransoms. Exactly how much data was compromised and if the ransom was paid has not officially been released by most of these entities, but it seems like these attacks have been large. Now, here are some examples of phishing emails which look legitimate. The samples show how cyber criminals are exploiting the vulnerable population even during the extraordinary circumstances we are in. With respect to some of them, at first look, you might think it's legitimate. Some of them sound that they are from well-known organizations. When you look closely, you could see some glaring errors. In the early days of the pandemic, emails were being circulated which talked about what you should know about COVID. Now, people being extra cautious and eager to learn could at times click on these emails and download the attachments. And now you're infected by malware and your systems have been compromised unbeknownst to you. Now, the emails which contain subjects and attachments related to the need for small businesses to apply for disaster relief loans or provide application status following the impact of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic ultimately deliver malware to those who open the attachments. All emails contain multi-stage executions, starting with the downloader to deliver a remote access tool to your system. These were, in most cases, surveillance tools that pose as legitimate software and has previously been observed being used in global hacking campaigns. Now, this is a recent study conducted called the State of Ransomware, which shows the percentage of organizations hit by ransomware. As you can see, along with technology companies and media companies, the energy, oil, and gas are heavily being hit as well. The stats are staggering, which shows the percentage of attacks which actually resulted in the data being encrypted. And the cost of remediation of ransomware is also far from trivial, as you can see. Bitcoin is the most preferred method of payment through the dark web and with the hackers. And this is because the transactions can be anonymized. Though every transactional Bitcoin has a traceable history, due to a lack of data on the users, there is no way to identify the recipient and hence the anonymity. And now to compound to all of this, the US Department of Treasury recently issued an advisory of potential sanctions for paying ransomware. So if you look at it, once you have been hit by ransomware, you're between a rock and a hard place, so to speak. Do you pay and get back to normal, but get possible sanctions, or not pay and accept total loss of data? Now you can see that you already have that traditional defense in depth methods already employed on your network. This could include the application and data security, host security, which includes timely patching, content filtering, network security in terms of intrusion detection and prevention. You can augment all of this with physical security and necessary security awareness training by implementing the necessary policy and procedures. This used to be well and good up until a few years ago. But this approach to security is falling behind. The attack surface has grown exponentially larger. With a large number of connected devices, which includes not only laptops and tablets, but also virtual cloud servers and storage, as well as connected tank monitors, soda machines, cameras, etc. Threats nowadays are more sophisticated, and the attacks are more coordinated than defenses. The rise of BYOD, or bring your own device, and personal cloud storage is eroding the network perimeter. Let's look at a typical attack of a ransomware. And here is an example of that. This clearly shows how the traditional defense in depth is actually failing. When you look at the flow of the typical ransomware infection, the security defenses had 6 different opportunities to stop the malware from downloading, executing, and finally encrypting all your critical data. This further shows that the traditional services you employ are becoming ineffective. Now, most all tools can protect against known threats, malware, and even zero-day attacks using sandbox technology. But the true protection you need is from fileless attacks, or even worst of all, targeted attacks and insider threats. These are the most sophisticated and damaging. And these are the ones which also require more analysis, which needs to be done to analyze if it's a true threat. And this is where true machine learning and artificial intelligence comes into play. The tool selected should be able to learn and understand, and then detect unknown threats and mitigate it before it's too late. Now, since endpoints are the most susceptible, they should be protected before they are exploited, and before the exploit propagates throughout the network. So what are endpoints? These are end devices on your store network, your cloud data center, your tablets, your laptops, your connected devices, your forecourt controllers, your tank monitors. A cyber criminal is not only targeting your local disk or operating system, but also the connected devices, like I mentioned. The malware downloaded is usually small and pre-programmed to download and start other malicious files. It could then download an information stealer that focuses on exfiltrating of account information from web browsers, and at the same time, download ransomware. What I described, for example, is the modus operandi of the coronavirus ransomware, which is downloaded and deployed. What this ransomware would then do is rename the C drive as coronavirus and encrypt all the files. Then ransom is demanded in the typical fashion for ransom payment, which is Bitcoin. Now let's look at the typical store environment. You could have your connected forecourt controllers, POS or self-service kiosks, but also routers and even back office order management devices. These are all susceptible to targeted attacks, and appropriate defenses are needed to protect them. And this is where endpoint security comes in. Now, the endpoint security industry is predominantly split by 2 classes of products, EPP and EDR. EPP stands for Endpoint Protection Platform, which covers traditional anti-malware scanning, whereas EDR, or Endpoint Detection Response, covers some more advanced capabilities, like detecting and investigating security incidents and the ability to remediate endpoints to pre-infection state. So EPP is actually a solution deployed on endpoint devices to prevent file-based malware, to detect and block malicious activity. Now, the endpoint protection platforms aim to prevent traditional threats like known malware and advanced threats like fileless attacks, ransomware, and zero-day vulnerabilities. Now, Gartner has defined a category to continuously provide an identification of ongoing advanced attacks and to more rapidly respond to detected attacks. And this is called EDR, or Endpoint Detection and Response. This is a type of security solution that provides real-time visibility into endpoint activities. Now, this is done by detecting malicious behavior, monitoring and recording endpoint data, and responding to threats. The security teams proactively prevent threats by manually analyzing endpoint data they receive from EDR solutions. Now, consider your distributor retail locations. You need to essentially protect every single asset in your locations against targeted attacks. And when compromised, you need to quickly detect and remediate. Now, most EDR solutions provide four main capabilities. The security incident containment, where the EDR solution can block the security incidents at the endpoints. Then there is the threat detection, the ability to detect malicious activity. Incident response, where the EDR solutions offer incident response capabilities like security incidents prioritization to help the security teams respond to attacks. And then comes the incident investigation. The EDR simplifies the forensic investigation of incidents by building a central repository of endpoint data. But increased visibility of EDR solutions means now you're inundated with an amount of data and consequently an increased amount of analysis. Now, because of this, most EDR solutions currently are not scalable. They require too many resources like time and money and skilled workforce, which are in short supply. And that is why the EDR solutions have now evolved to something called active EDR, which is an automated response that relies on artificial intelligence and machine learning to take the burden off the security operations center. It allows the security teams to quickly understand the story and root cause behind a threat. Now, how do you select the right service providers? Now, if you have decided to deploy an endpoint solution, how do you select the right managed security service provider to deploy and manage the service? They should be a 24/7 managed service with an augmented SOC and qualified support personnel. They should have the right solution which uses AI, ML, or artificial intelligence and machine learning in detecting and categorizing the unknown threats. And most important of all, someone who has options to provide you a remediation solution as well. I know that I quickly went through a lot of slides, and hopefully I've been able to provide you an overview of the current threat landscape and why you should employ some kind of an endpoint protection or endpoint detection response, and why a managed security service provider will be the ideal person to help you in that journey to protect against those unwanted threats and also the ever-increasing threat landscape. With that, I will now pass it on to Ali and Kara and take questions, if any.
Ajit, thank you very much. That was a lot of great information and short and sweet, just the way I think we all kind of like it as well. And so just a reminder to all the attendees, please type your questions into the GoToWebinar question panel, and we'll be happy to take them. Please no vendor-specific questions, and we'll be happy to address those. Just while people are typing in their questions, I do have a couple for you. Sure. You had mentioned, just sheer outsourcing, and that seems to make the most sense to me. But are there some companies that have their own security operations center, their own SOC, or what do you find as sort of the normals?
So yeah, there is. I would say a lot of companies are trying to invest in the security operations center. That's the trend we have been constantly seeing. But what we have also been seeing with a lot of our customers is the fact that when they try to build up their security personnel, they are able to retain them for the first 2 years, And as soon as they get the necessary training and expertise, they are poached by other bigger companies, or they transfer over to other security companies. And they tend to come back to a managed security service provider saying, hey, we want the service, we lost our necessary personnel. That's the consistent story we have been hearing. Everyone understands that security is part and parcel on a network, and they need the necessary security, but they're finding it difficult to, one, hire the people, and they make the necessary investments, and then after the fact to retain the people. So they don't want to deal with that hassle anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I think of like, obviously bigger companies, even bigger companies are outsourcing their SOC just for some of those very reasons. And it is expensive to stand up because it's 24/7 monitoring. You need to have people who know what they're doing, and things like that. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, what we're also seeing is, like you mentioned, it's people used to think that getting a managed security service provider is going to cost them arm and a leg. That's really not been the case. With all the sophisticated tools which a managed security service provider can use, a lot of the services can be provided and catered to them, a particular customer. So you don't need to think that, hey, oh, I see a list price or something in the internet which says this is the amount of money I have to pay for the service. That's typically not the case. We have seen that managed security service providers are now working to tailor and meet the requirements and provide tailored solutions and services to them, and meet the customer halfway, or even actually provide the entire requirements to them and ability to work with them in a cost-effective manner.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's becoming more and more affordable as more and more people are looking to outsource that.
Right.
So this seems to be a fairly new concept, at least within the petroleum retail space, and obviously, we've heard a lot. We had the combined MNSP, or Managed Network Service Providers, a few months ago, talking about those programs, and it seems that these days, looking at the ransomware now with the new sanctions requirements for the payment of ransomware, that now more than ever, data security just has to be really, really top of mind.
Right.
And some of the other things we talk about too are, and I guess one of the things that I get on my own soapbox about is the exports of the point of sale system logs. Are you exporting those and to the right people so that somebody's monitoring? And for compliance reasons, you should be looking at those daily, those logs, right? Exactly. And things like that kind of go on. And so it's all a part of that. And I think too that I guess I just really find this very, very intriguing, and some of the AI learning or the AI and the machine learning you were talking about is saying, okay, so if Kara logs in from Houston one day, and then at 2:00 in the afternoon, she's logging in from another country, kind of putting that artificial intelligence or that machine learning together to say, did Kara really have enough time to get from Houston, Texas to wherever that is? Is that right?
Exactly. And I think that's fair, because with the amount of logging, it's like log fatigue, right? So the backend systems like the managed SIMs and all of that can only do so much. So that's why you would think there is a be all end all, one single solution to meet every single requirement. But that's how the security market is kind of a fractured market, where people are concentrating on particular solutions because they have a targeted method to block something in that particular segment. There is no solution like in a VoIP solution, for example. You have a SIP solution, you have the phones, the VoIP phones, and then there is the SIP protocol, which is all encompassing. And so I know it's not a apples to apples comparison, but what I'm trying to say is, in the security market at least, there are targeted solutions, and unfortunately, you need these targeted solutions, and all of them need to be employed for a full-blown protection. There is nothing I can buy off the shelf. Okay, when I buy this or purchase this, can protect my entire environment. Unfortunately, it's not the case.
Yeah, yeah. We've had a couple questions come in. Is first, for the oil brands and those out there that are part of the major oil brand infrastructure, are you considering endpoint protection services to protect your brand or marketers from a breach event? And I can't speak for the other brands, but I know for ours, we're definitely trying to educate because even though the sites might be a level 4 merchant, they need to still be PCI compliant. And so part of that compliance is making sure that you're doing everything that you can to avoid a data breach, and that you're logging those files and you're monitoring those on a daily basis. So and I would assume that others are preaching the same based on what I'm hearing. Another question was, we had Ajit had showed the OFAC, the recent OFAC announcement that came out regarding the potential sanction risks for facilitating ransomware payments. And the question was, what are government agencies doing to help victims beyond the sanctions? And do the agencies offer methods for tracking along with coordinated payments to catch and recover? And I don't know, I'm not sure the answer to that, because this is a fairly new announcement that just came out.
Exactly. And I think this is what caught, I'm sure nobody has heard about this. And so the details of that will still need to be vetted out. How do you actually know that you're going to make a payment? So you could initially say that the payment is going to somewhere in Western Europe, but the eventuality, it might be going to another nation state, which is in the sanction list. And unfortunately, since most of the payment is through Bitcoins, it's heavily shadowed, and there is no way, there is no traceability to any of that. So how do these investigations happen? Do you actually report it? Like where I'm from, the city of Baltimore was there, which was heavily hacked. They fought against it, and they lost, right? And then they had to increase the payment. So now when cities are being hacked or any of those happen, do they actually report it, or do they make the payments? Because you essentially don't know and track all the money actually where exactly that is eventually going to land up. So a lot of details to be understood there. I think this is just the initial version of what they have published. I think more details will be coming out fairly soon.
Exactly, and that actually announcement came from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, and you could probably search that for that. And they actually have a subscription that you can get, and you could subscribe to all of their notifications. And they do send out a lot of notifications, because I don't know about you, but I do subscribe, and there are many folks that are looking at this to try and figure out exactly what we're all going to do. So
yeah.
Okay. Well, there are no further questions, and so if you could move to the next slide, please, Ajit.
Yeah.
And just wanted to remind everybody that you can find this at Conexxus.org, the recording in about 7 days, and you can get a copy of the slide deck. If you complete the survey, you'll be getting an email after the conclusion of this webinar, and just 3 to 4 short survey questions asking what you'd like to see in the future for content, so on and so forth. And then if you need to reach us or need to obtain a certificate for PCI continuing ed hours, please info@conexxus.org, email. And that's it for today. All right, thanks, Ajit. Thank you, Ali. Appreciate you and sharing your knowledge today. Everybody have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks. Bye.